Hello there. In this video, I will quickly show you how to make character crouch smoothly, and I will also show you how to stop that weird character snapping after crouch key is pressed when character is in the air. So without further ado, let's begin then. In here, I am using the default third person template in which I already set the input action for crouch. In here, I am using press trigger, so crouching would be toggle in and out rather than holding the button. And in the input mapping context, control key is set as crouch key. For the animations, I'm using the APP base, which is a plain copy of APP Mani. It's mostly same with some changes related to crouch. I will get to that, but first let's focus on the crouch animation, which I migrated from Lara Starter project. You can download Lara project from Unreal Marketplace for free, but before using Lara animations, in the crouch walk forward animation, make sure this enable root motion is unchecked and this force root lock is checked. If you uncheck it, then it starts to move because Lara project uses the root motion in the animation. Now let's go to the BP third person character. In here there is nothing much change except I am using APP base, and in the character movement component can crouch is true, just to tell Unreal Engine that this character can crouch. I also changes the crouch half height to match the animation. Basically it changes the capsule component height when character is crouching. For the crouch logic, there are two variables. One is can crouch, which default value is true because by default character is standing, which means character can crouch. And the another variable is should crouch in air. The purpose of this variable is to check if character can crouch from the air or not. The default value of it is false because by default character is on the ground. Now this my crouch function in which this parameter value is true because if we go inside it, then there are two parts of it. One is called when this variable is true and another part executes when it's false. When it says that this part executes when character lands, which I will get to that, but first let's focus on this part here. In here, when character is not falling, then this function gets called. This function is like when this parameter value is true, which is can crouch variable, then execute this crouch function and make can crouch false, else call uncrouch function and make can crouch true. Now here, should crouch in air variable value gets inverted when character is in the air or when is not falling is false. Remember, this whole part here executes when crouch key is pressed. So the real condition is when crouch key is pressed and character is in the air, then invert the should crouch in air value. Now if I play it, normally simple crouch function called when crouch key is pressed, and if I press crouch key when character is in the air, then should crouch in the air gets inverted. You can see the value on top left if you haven't noticed. Now let's go to this part. In here this function simply prints these variables. I used format text here just to make the variable value readable. So if we go back, then after that function it checks if can crouch and should crouch in air is true, then it executes simple crouch function and then set the should crouch in air value as false. So how this part is called? Well, basically it's called from here. This notify is set in this land animation which used by default in third person template. So whenever this animation plays, then on this part it calls this anim notify, and in return it calls my crouch function with crouch key pressed as false. So then this part here can get executed. Okay, in full context what it do is when crouch key pressed, simple crouch function called. When character normally jumps, then let animation plays and anim notify called, which then calls this function with crouch key pressed as false. So this part executes, and remember crouch key is not pressed and should crouch in your default value is false. so it won't go further. Now if I press crouch key when character is in the air, then should crouch in air value gets inverted and logic goes further. I did that in this way because if I press crouch key two times when character is in the air, then should crouch in air gets inverted twice and character won't crouch. Now if you don't want it to work like this, then let's say you want character to crouch from air. When crouch key is pressed, it doesn't matter how many times it pressed. For that, you can just remove this and make it true. Remember, in here this variable sets as false. And now if I play it, then it does not matter how many times I press crouch key. If I press it even one time, then it crouches. But I do prefer it like this. It's personal choice though. Now let's get to the animation logic. In the event graph of ABP base, I changed this character variable into BP third person character. Now in here, it's simple. Through movement component is crouching function called and it gets promoted into a variable. Also there is this anim notify landed which you already know. Now in this anim graph there is crouch locomotion. In crouch locomotion there is crouch idle state. Inside it there is crouch idle animation. Also this loop animation checkbox is checked, so animation will continue after playing one time. For crouch walk there is this animation. For crouch idle to crouch walk state, the condition is if should move variable is true, and for crouch walk to crouch idle it's inverted. Now let's go to the main state. In here I'm using two crouch state ls, which sets that crouch entry state can be transitioned from locomotion, land, and crouch exit states if is crouching variable is true. From crouch entry to crouch locomotion there are two conditions. One is this checkbox. Basically what it do is it plays the crouch entry animation completely and then goes to crouch locomotion. The second condition is if should move is true. In the crouch locomotion state there is this cached crouch locomotion. Now if we drive our attention into from crouch state ls, then there is crouch locomotion and crouch entry is checked. For crouch exit state the condition is crouching is false. For crouch exit to locomotion the first condition is again this checkbox and second is if should move variable is true. Now with that we are done with this method, but it is still not perfect because if character is under a mesh and then if I press crouch key, now if character goes out from here, I mean from under it, then it automatically uncrouch, and so far everything would work correctly. The problem arises when I press crouch key two times. Now character uncrouches automatically, but now if I press crouch key then nothing happens and I had to press it again to make it work. Well, the reason why that happens is if I press crouch key, crouch function is called. Now if I press crouch key two more times, then the last function called is the crouch function. Now if I press crouch key, nothing happens. Instead, uncrouch function is called. And after that, it starts to work normally, like nothing happens. Like here, if I press crouch key three times, then last function called is uncrouch. And if character goes out, everything works normally. So how to fix that? Well, you can do that by using line trace and based on that execute crouch function or not. I mean there are many ways to do it, but it is out of the scope of this video. So in the end, this is it. Now if you're thinking that there are better ways to make character crouch, then yes, of course there are. I mean you can find hundreds of different ways to make it work, especially if you're talking about programming. But I just wanted to show you this particular way. So I hope you learned something new, and I'm still figuring out the video format, so it's a bit rough here and there. So this is it. And in the end, have a good day. And if it's not, then have a good night. See ya.